right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, last week I outlined for you the hellish future that a Joe Biden presidency would conceivably look like. This week, his team decided to make it a lot easier for me to show you by leaking Axios some of the prominent people that would be included in his cabinet. It's one of the most terrifying lists I've ever seen for high government office. And it highlights more than anything exactly how much of a threat Joe Biden would be to everyday American citizens. Before I begin, I should note that the Biden campaign calls the list an abject fabrication, but Jim Vandehei and Mike Allen are a lot more trustworthy sources of information than they are. So let's begin. The list includes Obama World Greatest Hits with John Kerry as Secretary of State, former National Security Advisor Susan Rice. Get this, Michael Bloomberg as the head of the World Bank. Worst of all, includes JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon and the Vice Chairman of Bank of America as possibilities for the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury. How are they thinking about rewarding Pete Buttigieg? Well, as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations or as a U.S. Special Trade Representative. The list gets even more insidious. Kamala Harris as Attorney General, Morgan Stanley executive Tom Nides as the Secretary of Commerce, not to mention a host of deep state acolytes from the Obama years in the White House returning to the helms of the NSA and the CIA. What I have listed for you is worse than a return to 2013. That is a full-scale acceleration of neoliberalism in the White House. Any list that includes two financial billionaires and two Wall Street executives as stewards of the global economy should be disqualified in the year 2020. And what makes the list even more ironic is that it came out on the exact same day that the Dow Jones had the single worst day since 2008. I think we all remember who was in charge the last time the global economy needed saving. Do you have any doubt who Jamie Dimon would advocate for a bailout for if he was in power? Consider small-town mayor, former Pete Buttigieg, as the U.S. Special Trade Representative. Do-nothing mayor would reverse Trump's trade war with China. He would accelerate McKinsey neoliberalism that cut deals like TPP and NAFTA to sell out Americans to the altar of so-called cheaper prices for all. And as we learned in the Trump era more than anything, personnel is policy. Each of the people floated here represent the insidious perma-swamp of Washington, D.C., revolving door former officials who fail upwards in government policy, leapfrogging from one neoliberal administration to the next, and continuing their campaign of destruction for average Americans. In this particular instance, personnel may be even more important than ever. Joe Biden will be 77 years old if he takes the oath of office in 2021, and his mental fatigue is clear as day for, I think, the entire world to see. If he were to become president, I think it's probably fair to say he wouldn't exactly be the most hands-on chief executive, meaning that the people he puts in charge of respective government departments will have more power than they did under Obama. I mean, this was him on the campaign trail just yesterday.
We have the greatest research universities in all the world, more than the rest of the world combined. We have the most productive workers in the world, 3 times productive workers in Asia. We find ourselves in a position where we have people in the United States of America. Look, they always say Biden dismisses China. I don't dismiss China. But if we invest in ourselves, China will not be, as they say in little steel China I come from in Claremont, Delaware, not a patch on our jeans.
I pose to you again the question I did last week. Can you or your family afford to go back to 2013 with these neoliberals in charge? Michael Bloomberg in charge of a World Bank means a total sellout to the Chinese government. Jamie Dimon in charge of Treasury means the greatest Wall Street ally in charge of that agency since the 1920s. A Morgan Stanley executive in charge of the Commerce Department needs no more protection of the U.S. steel industry. And I think we all know what a McKinsey-friendly trade policy would look like. They're not even ashamed of it anymore. A Biden administration means a total and complete sellout of the working and middle class of this country. And I saw that list, Crystal. Actually, you sent it to me. And I was shocked. I mean, I don't know how you float Jamie Dimon to be the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury and Michael Bloomberg as president of the World Bank. That's insane. That's a literal plutocracy. That's what it is.
Some kind of audacity there. Yeah.
On the worst day for Wall Street in the history since 2008, and we were talking today in the show about bailouts. Okay, who do you think Jamie Dimon and Michael Bloomberg and a Morgan Stanley executive and the Vice Chairman of Bank of America and all these other backbench neoliberals are going to say? We got a bailout if we got to do another bailout this time.
Of course. And what are they going to do for average people?
Nothing. Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. Just like last time. I mean, look, we shouldn't be surprised. The audacity of it, I think, surprised both of us that you would flay. It wasn't just Jamie Dimon. It was like a whole list of Wall Street alerts from every bank.
I encourage people to go read that list because I didn't even, I mean, I barely mentioned it there, but the deep state people there too. I mean, all these former NSA, Tom Donilon, all these people who worked on the Obama drone program. I mean, all these people are coming right back
getting the band
into
back
the Situation
together.
Room.
Getting the band back together. I mean, it's really making good on his promise that nothing will fundamentally change, right? And that's why, look, when we have talked throughout over the months on this show about what are the things to really look at when you're evaluating a candidate, and a lot of it is how they actually run their campaign. Who are they dependent on for power? Who brought them to the dance? And so you see with a Bernie Sanders, you see that he had this broad-based grassroots support. You saw that with an Andrew Yang, this broad-based grassroots support, where those were the people, those are his constituents, those are the people who he's going to answer to. Joe Biden, on the other hand, and increasingly Elizabeth Warren, as she changed her tune on money in politics, you saw where their bread was buttered, whose calls they're going to answer, who they're going to be responsive to, and ultimately who they are going to run their administration for. So a lot of times you can tune out whatever they're saying, like whatever policies they claim to support, whoever they claim to be fighting for. No, look at whose calls they are answering and think about who they are going to bring in a potential administration. This says it all.
This is what's happening right now across Washington. Phones are lighting up in the think tank class amongst lobbyists. Lists are being compiled, dossiers, everything. You know, the Clinton people had the appointments down to the number 15th person in rank. That's how, look, one thing you can say about neoliberals is these people are very good at spreadsheets. And one of the things they do, they compile these spreadsheets, lists. They're ready to go on day one.
Well, they've had the infrastructure for decades now, so it's all there for them.
And they are ready to come in and rev this thing up to the, into overdrive. And that's what I mean with Biden. I mean, Biden probably has at least better middle class instincts than Jamie Dimon and Michael Bloomberg. Do you really think he's going to be able to tell Jamie Dimon, hey, cool it a little bit on what's going on here with finance? Get out of here. But Dimon and all these other people will be some of the most powerful agency heads in the history of the American presidency because Biden is not all there. And under that sort of circumstance, who you pick is more important than who the president is. And again, this is what is at stake for everybody at home. Bailouts, how the agencies get managed, policy, every single one of these things flows from the agency top down. So who you put in charge matters more than anything.
And if you look at the markets right now and where the economy is heading, I mean, we're talking about real damage to real human beings. This isn't like some esoteric policy debate or intellectual whatever. This becomes incredibly real for real human beings, literal life and death. And it reminds me of something that you've talked about, critique you've had of the Trump administration, that one of the biggest mistakes he made was who he surrounded himself. And that has very much shaped what the direction of that administration has been.
Yeah. Goldman Sachs executive in charge of the Secretary of the Treasury, Commerce Department headed by Wilbur. I mean, actually, Wilbur Ross is not terrible on trade, but again, you read these inside accounts. Peter Navarro, who is correct about everything on economics, basically is sidelined by Steve Mnuchin, Gary Cohn, former Wall Street guy, all these guys. Gary Cohn effectively held steel tariffs off for an entire year while he was in the presidency. I mean, think about that. Like, the signature campaign issue for Donald Trump was headed off by a very effective neoliberal manager. Now, think about that. That's with a president who is definitely more headstrong than Joe Biden actually agrees. So he would just empower them. That's what it would be. And yes, my greatest critique of the Trump administration is they did not hire many people who agreed with what they ran on.
Yeah.
And look, this is what we have, a mixed bag in terms of results. But with the Biden administration, it won't be a mixed bag. It will actually be exactly what they want. And that's what's more terrifying, is that the Obama administration was very good at doing what they wanted to do, not what they said they would do. In terms of the financial policy and the financial welfare and how much they spread around on trade deals and all of that, they were excellent at it. The best managers that have ever been in the White House probably since John F. Kennedy. And that's part of the issue. right?
Yeah.
Is that manage their way away from the rest of the country.
Well, and just think about, if you look over this list, how many of these people could easily be in a Mitt Romney administration, as a Joe Biden administration. That's why we talk about why there is actually so much bipartisan consensus in this town.
Right.
You see it in a list like this.
Yeah, certainly. All right, I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.